Hello, viewers, and welcome to the latest episode of the Huddle. Tim Poole here, and I'm with Ron Segev, founding partner of Segev LLP. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, pleasure, Tim. Good to see you.
Yeah, so we're talking to you at the moment at a kind of big time for Canadian gaming, certainly in Alberta, but a kind of landmark piece of news for you guys recently. To start with, could you, for our benefit of viewers, talk us through your background and what kind of gaming clients you guys have?
Sure, yeah. So I've been in the gaming and betting space for most of my professional career. I've been practicing law for about just over 20 years. I'd say about 18 of those years I've been in gaming and betting. Most people ask me how I got into the space, and my story is so boring that it's actually worth telling. And I basically applied for a wanted ad. I applied to a wanted ad, and I knew nothing about the space. And I remember my first day showing up for the interview. I was the oldest guy in the room, and I was probably 30 years old. And there were no desks. It was just all poker tables and laptops and Beats headphones. And I felt like, what is this thing? But I really liked the team, and I decided to take a fly on this industry, and I've been in it ever since. I love the people in the space. I love the can-do attitude. I love their ability to figure out how to get past no and get to yes, and working on these interesting puzzles with them. So that's how I got into the space. I was general counsel for this group for many years, and then the time came for me to start my own practice. And the idea was to create a purpose-built full solutions business law firm for the gaming and betting industry. We've grown considerably since then. I founded the firm in the first incarnation of the firm was in 2013, and now we have a team of almost 60 people, about 24 lawyers, offices in Vancouver, Canada, in Toronto, Canada, St. Louis, Missouri, in the United States, and more recently, and the subject of this conversation, we just opened an office in Calgary in anticipation of the market. We're still a full solutions business firm for the gaming and betting space. Our service offering has definitely diversified since then, and now we do everything from private and public corporate finance and M&A. We do a lot of land-based casino work, buy, sell, obviously regulatory compliance, real estate, employment, commercial work, whatever the client needs, we'll try to figure out. And we've grown along with those client needs. And then as clients have dabbled in other spaces, we've sort of followed them. So we do a lot of work in crypto. We've had many clients in Canada who were interested in the cannabis space. So we do a lot of work in cannabis and psychedelics, payments, and I think the niche that we've developed is really, regulatory industries or industries that have a sort of a veneer of how should I put it? A need for a nuanced approach to a regulatory framework and understanding of how to work with regulators. I think that's really our sweet spot. Gaming and betting is still certainly a big part of what we do. Our clients are truly international in nature. Obviously, in Europe, North America, with offices in Canada and the US. We several months ago launched an India desk, so we're interested in assisting clients in the Indian market. Now we're getting a lot of outbound interest from Indian companies looking to either establish offices in Europe or in the United States or Canada. And they're generally looking to, either acquire talent, technology, or access capital, and we're getting them set up in those ways. So yeah, that's a decent snapshot about our firm.
Yeah, no, detailed breakdown. Thanks very much. All very interesting. And to regular viewers, it might sound like a bit of a broken record here, but your story is I think it's the kind of the archetypal gaming story, in that how you entered it, you weren't necessarily perhaps growing up dreaming of working in gaming and betting, but it's a dynamic industry. Once you enter, it retains you, and there's plenty of kind of appealing factors to work in an industry like this. Quite interested to know as well, you mentioned kind of crypto and cannabis, for example, as other industries. Maybe quickly, how does gaming compare to those? Are there a lot of similarities?
Oh, totally, yeah. Mm-hmm. So, with gaming and betting, we have issues with respect to, I should say quite proudly, these issues aren't really that salient anymore. But in the early days, there was concern about, what were the origin of the proceeds of these initial investments in these companies, and was there any criminal activity? Was there any, unregulated activity, that sort of thing. And so you had to learn how to transition the industry from an unregulated industry to a regulated industry. You could say the same about psychedelics and cannabis. You can say the same about blockchain. And then as regulators started to learn more about the industry, you had to learn how to work alongside the regulator, earning their trust and being a valuable stakeholder of the industry, and sort of push the industry along to a more mature footing. And again, we saw that in gambling, and we saw that in cannabis. We're seeing that in psychedelics, and we're certainly seeing that in blockchain. So all of these regulated spaces share that sort of characteristic. Some have obviously their own unique challenges. I'd say of the three, gaming and betting is probably the most mature along the path. But as new markets open in gaming and betting, you're not necessarily reinventing the wheel, but you're reliving those old experiences and leaning on those old experiences. All the learnings are transferable.
Sure. And by the way, when I said maybe quickly to preface that question, that wasn't to rush you. That was because we could probably have a whole conversation in itself about those separate industries. But obviously we're focusing mainly on the gaming side. Yeah. You kind of mentioned that the different offices you have, and the India aspect was quite interesting. Certainly, kind of from lawyers in India we've worked with, that there's a lot of scope for kind of regulatory change there at the moment. But what kind of markets are you most active in? Do they very much reflect the offices that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah. So, obviously the markets that we're most active in are, from a market perspective, would be Canada and the United States. That's where our offices are. Our lawyers are qualified in Canada and in the United States. We have our India desk is based out of our Toronto office, and we have a lawyer who's a qualified Indian lawyer as well as a qualified Canadian lawyer. And so we're running the India desk through him. India is an emerging market for us, and that's if you take sort of a market-directed approach. We've acted as outside in-house counsel for companies that are based in Asia that are looking for a single point of contact to access "quote unquote" Western markets. So, by way of example, we may have a client reach out to us from Taiwan or from Singapore, for example, saying, I've got a studio, or I'm a box manufacturer. I want to access again, the market in Nevada. I'm interested in doing a deal with some distributors or some publishers in Western Europe. Can you help us? And so we'll take that on, sort of as I said, an outside in-house counsel. We've been in the space for long enough that we've got a very, very strong network of local partners. So we'll always lean on the local experts when we need to, and that works very well for many of our clients in Asia. We also help advise on sort of the broader global strategy piece. So, even if there isn't necessarily a Canadian or a US specific angle, sometimes we'll be engaged to advise on sort of just a global strategy where the initial markets may not be in North America. There's an expectation that they would roll into North America. And they come to us just because we've been doing business in this space for so long. And again, because of our large network of, CSPs and legal professionals, we know the banks, we know the payment services companies, we know all the law firms, we know, and again, if they're looking for people or third party technology vendors or whatever, we could tell them, here's a variety of 3 or 4, testing labs, for example, or, quality assurance companies, for example, or studios. And it sort of shortens their learning curve a little bit.
Mhm. Absolutely. To be more specific geographically, and as you mentioned earlier, let's talk about Alberta and the new office for you guys. But in terms of the market at the moment, walk us through the current situation. Are we pretty much at a green light stage? I know everyone's expecting the gaming market to go ahead. Where exactly are we?
Yeah, I think we're at the whatever the color is before green. I think that's the color we're at.
Sure.
Certainly they haven't opened the doors yet, but at the last Canadian Gaming Summit, Minister Dale Nally came out and spoke very confidently about the emerging market, the opening of the market. Obviously, we've been following this for a year now, maybe more, and the rumors that we're hearing are that Alberta is in close conversation with Ontario, leaning on Ontario's learnings, getting an understanding of the infrastructure that Ontario put in place, getting an understanding of how they might be able to work with Ontario, and acknowledging that Ontario did a good job, which they did. The numbers don't lie, and also acknowledging that Ontario did a lot of the heavy lifting, and there's not necessarily a reason to reinvent the wheel. So, as a result, we think Alberta is going to be able to go live to market faster than Ontario did, because Ontario did all that hard work, and based on again, on our industry intel, if you will, based on Minister Nally's comments, based on some conversations that we've had with some people at the AGLC, we thought it would serve our clients really well to just get on with things. Let's open an office. The AGLC already has a framework for disclosure and background checks, and they have a way of doing things in that regard, and so we can start helping our clients prepare. We don't think the corporate and personal disclosures are going to be radically different. It's how Alberta's been doing things for years. So we're telling our clients, look, it's probably going to be first come, first served, the same way Ontario was. If you want to be first served, let's get to work. Let's make sure your materials are ready to go, so that when that light turns to green, we can submit and get going. People always ask me, when is it going to happen? Yeah, I wish I had the crystal ball. I don't think it's going to happen this year. If it happened early next year, it wouldn't surprise me.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. I mean, like you say, crystal ball in terms of the exact date is always difficult. And you've actually answered a follow-up question I had planned about how similar it was going to be to Ontario. As you say, it did a good job. There was plenty of praise, not just for kind of the revenue numbers, but actually that the regulator was firm in some places, in the sense that it was a proper regulatory system. And I think there were benefits all round. If Alberta was to look to perhaps learn something from Ontario, and not necessarily just the good points, something to learn that maybe to avoid repeating. I mean, what could be in that area? You mentioned maybe perhaps even just that it goes to market quicker. I mean, is that a significant kind of, I guess, second mover advantage, if you're to call it that?
Yeah, I like that. I think they would have second mover advantage. If there's one thing I'd like to see Alberta emulate is, for lack of a better expression, is the sort of service-minded approach that IAGCO took when it approached the private market. So in particular, we had many European clients tell us that they were very pleasantly shocked at how easy it was to work with the regulator. There was a service desk with people who were service-minded, who were actually interested in answering questions and trying to shed light on some areas that still had some gray around them. Obviously, it was a developing regulatory market, and people had many questions. We had some clients in Europe tell us that, for some regulators in Europe, you just couldn't reach out to them. You necessarily have to go through legal counsel. But with Ontario, you can just pick up the phone and establish a relationship with your regulator and just ask questions. So I'd really like to see Alberta emulate that. I think it's one of the reasons that people were confident to enter the Ontario market. If there's one thing that I could share that I'd like to see done a bit differently, perhaps it's with respect to some of the advertising and marketing guidelines. Ontario's recently adopted some guidelines that some people might think are perhaps subjective in nature. So the idea that you can't have an athlete or celebrity endorse a product where that athlete or celebrity is likely to appeal to children. So there's some there's some subjectivity at play there, right? Who has the final call? Who has the final say over that? So I think the market would probably like a more clear-cut approach to some of those guidelines. I think also that the affiliates were overlooked in the Ontario market. We represent some large affiliates, and almost without exception, they were interested in getting formal registration or licensure, as the term is used in other jurisdictions. And the reason they wanted to do that is they wanted to be proper partners with the IAGCO. And from their perspective, the affiliates think that they're sort of a piece of the responsible gambling puzzle. And they also, with proper registration or licensure, it helps sort of weed out the black hat actors who are still marketing offshore casinos. And there's also some frustration around affiliates who were marketing properly regulated, registered Ontario operators not being able to market promos or bonuses or bonus deposit matches. And the reason that was frustrating is because that's typically what people will search for on the internet. Right. And if I'm an affiliate that is only working with registered Ontario operators and I can't offer bonuses, then what is going to show up on those search engine results pages are the affiliates who are not complying. Right. So they're either not complying or they're marketing offshore casinos. And so many of my clients think that left sort of a gap in the market, if you will. I think if Alberta looked at that, that's probably something that they could improve. I think that they can work more closely with the affiliates as partners. I think the affiliates are, as we all know, very important. Traffic is the lifeblood of the industry, and the affiliates tend to do a very good job of controlling that traffic.
Definitely, I really appreciate the fact that you highlight some genuine positives and genuine things that could be improved. To your last point, I think it's a classic trap for a regulator there, where policies can kind of hinder licensees, and as you say, top of the search will be kind of the black hat operators and kind of black market illegal. And when it came to your point about the subjectivity of kind of who could appeal to perhaps your younger audience, I know we've had some examples of that in the UK with Jake Paul, for example. I think it was Ladbrokes that tweeted about Jake Paul, and that advert was banned simply because they mentioned him, which is, as you say, that's a really interesting one because it could go either way kind of when it comes to legal opinion. You mentioned the affiliates that kind of you work with, and naturally you probably working with some larger operators as well, I can only assume. But again, this might be a bit of a crystal ball question, but bearing in mind what you've heard and what clients you kind of have, do you have any estimates of where the Alberta market could rank? Because Ontario, obviously, a very successful market, I think probably easily in kind of compares with top 10 US states. What are we kind of looking for in terms of hopes for the market? Yeah.
So we've seen some third-party firms run an analysis on that, and they're placing it at maturity that they're thinking it might be the 8th largest market in North America. So I think what's important to understand about Alberta is that it is 1/3 the size of Ontario, but Albertans tend to gamble more than Ontarians. The other thing is that I think there's just an enormous pent-up demand for a regulated iGaming market, regulated sports betting and iGaming market there. There's an anecdote that I like to share about the largest 50-50 draw in global history was at an Edmonton Oilers game. And I think tickets were on sale for 12 hours and generated $15 million in sales at a hockey game. They're mad for taking chances and hoping to win something. And I think we're definitely going to see that in the market. JMP Markets, which is a firm that analyzed the potential of the market, had said that iGaming alone, so the regulated sports betting iGaming market alone, is probably going to be worth about $700 million at maturity. I know Eilers Krejcik ran a similar study, and EK had put it at $900 million at full maturity. If we beat those numbers, it wouldn't surprise me. I think people are still surprised at the year-on-year growth that Ontario's putting out, and so yeah, I think it's a very good market. I once had an Israeli client tell me that their strategy was to go after secondary and tertiary markets in the United States, and not necessarily to dominate, to be like the number 2, number 3 player in each of those markets. And I asked him about that. I said, what kind of strategy is that? And he said, well, if you enter a state that's the size of Belgium, and population-wise, and I told you I was the number 2 provider in Belgium, you'd think that that's pretty impressive. And he said, well, there's 30, 40 states like that. So Alberta has a population of 5 million people, sizable. Their per capita gross gaming betting spend is very high. Not a bad market to play in. I also think that if you're in Ontario, it would probably make a lot of sense for you to be in Alberta, given that there's an expectation that the regulatory regimes are going to be very similar. And then also given my expectation that we're probably going to see some shared liquidity or pool liquidity between the two provinces. And if that's the case, I think it's just going to have a net accretive effect, right? It's just going to lift the prospects of each province.
So, some interesting points in favor, and definitely some big numbers that even at projected level, and as you say, there's a chance of beating those, certainly paint a picture. What would this mean potentially for wider Canadian gaming? So obviously we had Ontario regulated, saw success. Alberta potentially will see success as well. Are we going to see other regions think, well, we're just too slow on this, we're missing out, or are there maybe kind of more political and cultural factors that might slow that down more?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. So the two big provinces that follow Ontario would be Quebec and British Columbia. With respect to British Columbia, what the global market needs to understand is that one of the reasons that Ontario went with this new iGaming model was because PlayOLG, which was the provincial government website, didn't perform to expectation. Some people said that it disappointed. And so the government in Ontario was tired of bleeding tax revenue to offshore operators, and they decided to just take control of the matter, and they went this new route. In British Columbia, PlayNow.com is actually doing quite well. So perhaps the government doesn't see a dire need to shift gears. The other thing about British Columbia is that it's the gaming platform provider for Saskatchewan and Manitoba. So Saskatchewan and Manitoba are on the PlayNow.com platform under contract with British Columbia, and I think that tends to add some complexity to this idea that British Columbia is going to just open the market, because the BC market for BC isn't just BC, it's also Saskatchewan and Manitoba from a revenue perspective, right? The other thing we need to note is that there's a very important jobs piece at play. The PlayNow.com offices aren't in Vancouver. They're in Burnaby, which is a suburb of Vancouver that lots of great business parks there, lots of technology companies there. But there's a large presence in a more rural city called Kamloops, beautiful city on the Thompson River. That used to be a resources town. So pulling these very well-paying, very high-skilled jobs out of Kamloops, I think would be a political nightmare for whoever had to make that decision. And then, also politically, British Columbia has a lot of crown corporations. So, for whoever's watching this that doesn't know what a crown corporation is, it's basically a corporation that's owned and run by the government. So, we've got, BCLC, which is the British Columbia Lottery Corporation, but we also have ICBC, which is the Insurance Corporation of British Columbia, and we have BC Ferries and BC Transit and BC Hydro. And so culturally, it's not strange for British Columbians to spend their money with a crown corporation. I don't know that there's necessarily a push to privatize what's either considered an essential service or a service that has to be mindful of, protection of the public interest, RG issues, money laundering issues, and so forth. So I don't know that there's going to be a huge push to follow the Ontario model in British Columbia. I know that in Saskatchewan, the Saskatchewan Indian Gaming Authority has the mandate to run online for the province of Saskatchewan. Their contract with BCLC will eventually terminate. What they intend to do afterwards, I don't know, but we're certainly, I believe, a couple of years away from that. What is Manitoba going to do? I don't know, but we have to keep in mind that they're small markets, and are they going to attract an influx of attention from operators globally? I'm not sure. Possibly. That leaves Quebec. We've seen a coalition called the Quebec Coalition, which was a coalition of operators and platforms come together last year trying to put pressure on Lotto Quebec to adopt the Ontario model. Lotto Quebec, in reply, said, no thanks, not interested. I think what was also interesting was the fact that the Ministry of Finance, which oversees Lotto Quebec, was just silent on the whole thing. They didn't enter the conversation. But again, I think it's probably no thanks, not interested in the short term. So it'll be Alberta and Ontario. Alberta to come. Ontario already exists. Also notable is that Ontario and Alberta's governments are conservative governments. They have the same view of how to run the provincial economies. They have a more laissez-faire attitude. More enthusiastic about liberalizing markets and so forth.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear the nuances between the different regions, and perhaps I'm being a bit greedy that we're just about to see the second, region regulate, and then I'm already asking about how fast the other ones are gonna go. A final question from me. Obviously, we talked about the market in general, but we mentioned that you've opened this new office, and we've talked about kind of the different clients you work with. What are your hopes specifically for Segev LLP? For what are you guys aiming for in the market?
Yeah, I mean, well, first in that market, we want to assist as many service providers, technology providers, platform providers, payments companies, operators enter the market as possible. I mean, it's basically the same approach we used in Ontario. We're going to be using in Alberta. The other reason we opened an office in Alberta is because we've got a lot of clients who aren't necessarily gaming and betting clients that are more corporate finance clients, public markets teams that are looking to do more business in Alberta and have asked us to help them there. The Alberta Securities Commission, to their mind, is an attractive commission to work with. So we're going to be doing a lot more finance work in Alberta as well. For the firm, we just want to keep growing with our clients. And so that's, whether by acquisition or organic growth, we're looking at all avenues, and it's just to be able to keep up with our clients' appetites. If they want to enter new markets, we want to help them. If they want to explore new tech, we want to help them. If they want to do deals, we want to help them. And if that means growing, we'll just grow alongside them.
Sure. Well, Ron, thanks very much for your time, and best of luck in the market. It sounds like an exciting time for Albertan gaming. I'm sure we'll be in touch again soon. I'm sure there'll be some developments we can discuss.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate the chat.
Thank you. And to our viewers, thanks as always for watching.